Okay, we'll get the meeting started. You'll notice I'm holding a microphone. This is not for your benefit, this is for the benefit of the cameras at the back. So I'd like to start by opening the meeting and saying thanks to the Hunter Recreational Flying Club, especially Bob and Don. Don's over there, I don't know where Bob's gone. But they've both done a great job in helping us organise everything today. I'd also like to welcome those who are viewing this remotely on the net. This is a first for us, the webcast, and if it's taken up and it's a good popular option and people take an interest in it, we'll continue that and hopefully make it more interactive in time to come. I'd like to take a bit of a minute. We started this at our last general meeting in Lethbridge. Over the last few months, we've had a few people pass away due to flying accidents, and I just want to read out their names just to remind everyone that safety really is an issue, and we need to take care because there are risks involved in our sport, and the better we can address them, the better our chances are of coming home to our family and friends. So this year we've lost Robert Gregg at Wollongong, Robin Friend and Errol Young near Townsville. Jeffrey Arthur at Washpool. Jeffrey was not a current member, but he has been a past member. And more recently, we've lost Robert Pavan, who was on a flight from Gympie, or just near Gympie. He passed away very recently. So with that, like I say, I just want to remind everyone that safety is key in our sport. The safer we can be, the better off we're all going to be. Apologies, we've only got two apologies today. George Jennings and Jeff Kent. They've both sent in their apologies, they can't make it today. And I don't think we've got any proxies, no proxies. I don't think there's any motions on notice today anyway, so that's neither here nor there. We've also got a quorum. I'm not sure of the number of members here present today, but it's clear we've got a quorum. So, with that, we'll move into the business of the meeting. Minutes of the last general meeting. Does anyone have any questions, comments, alterations on those minutes? Nothing at all. Would someone like to move acceptance of those minutes? Anyone? You'll move? Can you just...
I was there, so I'll move.
So Don Ramsey to move. Can we have a seconder? Tony King to second. All those in favour? So that's carried. Business arising out of the minutes. There is no business. There was one action item, but that was dealt with at the last AGM. Does anyone have any other comments or questions at this point? Nope. We'll move on to the presentation of the reports then. I'll start with the President's report. This President's report will be published on our website, and I won't read it verbatim today. If you'd like some more detail, as I say, it will be published, so feel free. I start out by saying that there really isn't much to say today that we haven't said already this year. I think everyone here is aware of the things that we've been through 2 years and further back, and the things that we've been trying to change over the last 18 months, 2 years or so. We've had a lot of change in the office in terms of staffing, in terms of efficiency. We've got Kelly present with us today. She's one of our outstanding team in the office. We've made a few cutbacks in the office through natural attrition. Those people haven't been replaced, and we've maintained the level of output. In fact, we've improved our level of output throughout the year. Staffing is one of our biggest costs in the association. There's three big costs. We've got staff, insurances and our magazine. Staffing is one of those areas we don't like to let people go, but we've worked very hard this year. Where people have left, we haven't replaced them, and those people that have remained with us are now working harder than ever to deliver your services in a more efficient manner. And that includes aircraft registrations and member renewals. many of you will remember a few years ago, it could take literally months to get your aircraft registered. The average turnaround time is now 5 days or less. So that's a real testament to the effort that our staff are putting in. In terms of insurance, we've worked very hard as well on insurance to get everyone a better deal. We've now got better third-party personal coverage. We've now got better public liability coverage on our insurance. We haven't been able to save any money in terms of premiums, but they have not gone up, and we've increased our cover. So we've got better value out of our insurance as well. The third area, which I'm sure a lot of you will have questions about, is the magazine. We've, for a long time, we've provided this magazine as part of the membership fees, and the magazine has evolved from what was essentially an A4 printed letter to a nice professional glossy magazine that we've got today. This change has happened over a number of years, and we have never sought to recover the costs to produce that magazine, even though those costs have gone up. So what we're now doing today, our cost base has increased in other areas as well, so we now need to do something in order to get us back in the black. We're currently running at a deficit. I'll let Michael and Jim talk on the deficit later, but I will say that the deficit is less today than what we forecast 12 months ago. However, we still need to do a lot of work to get that back in the black over the next year. Part of that is to continue to provide the magazine, but we're going to give you two options. We'll continue to provide it for you in electronic format, and you can distribute that to all your friends and family. If you'd like a paper copy, as it is today, we'll ask you to contribute to the costs of the printing and distribution of that. Again, Michael will talk a bit about the numbers involved there. This is basically saying to our members, we need to come to the party. If we want this association to exist as it does today for the next few years, for the next 20 years, then we need to put something back into it as well. Rather than charge everyone an additional fee to do that, all we're saying is we're happy to provide the level of service that we provide today for the money that you pay today, and if you'd like that magazine, we'll only ask those who want a paper copy to pay a little bit extra. The magazine will still go out in printed copy to flying clubs and flight training facilities, so you'll still see them floating around the clubhouse and so on and so forth. And as I said before, the electronic copy can be distributed freely. On top of that, we've worked very hard over the last year to increase our working relationships, or improve our working relationships with the regulator. Michael and I just sat with the new Director of Aviation Safety, Mark Skidmore. We sat with him last Friday and had a very good conversation. We work very closely with Jonathan Alec, who's the Assistant Director of Aviation Safety. We now work very closely with Air Services Australia, ATSB, AMSA and all the other authorities as well. We've got a good relationship with the Minister of Transport, Warren Truss, and in the next 2 weeks, I think it is, we're going to see the Secretary for Transport. So we're really starting to affirm our place in aviation in Australia and form those relationships and get our cause across. So, look, I won't go on too much longer. I said it before, this report will be published online. It'll be available to everyone. We'll try and keep the meeting going. Sorry, I'm just trying to get to my agenda. We'll move on to the Secretary's report for Tony King, and then we'll hear from the Treasurer and the CEO. And at the completion of all the reports, we'll ask for questions, provide some feedback, and then we'll move to accept the reports as one block motion. So.
Thanks, Mick. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tony King, and I've been Secretary since about this time last year. The constitution of our organisation defines certain functions for the Secretary to perform. Probably the most important one is to make sure that all our record keeping and so forth is all up to scratch. As with the other office holders, we're not doing that personally. We have a paid staff, and we're utilising them to do that that sort of activity. And I'm pleased to report that that is going very well. Our staff are doing a really good job. We've done a lot of work, as I'm sure many of you would be aware, over the last year or two to make sure that our records in the office are all up to scratch. There is still some of that work going on in the background, but there's also been quite a bit of work done in the last several months to make sure that it doesn't impact the members in terms of, in particular, long lead times and so forth for particular transactions, which I'm sure many of you will have experienced in the past. So those things are behind us, thanks to the team that we've got in place now. One of the other critical things in the office is information management. We've found that RAOS has grown very substantially over the last 10 or 15 years, as most of you would know, but our systems and processes haven't developed at anywhere near the same pace, and so consequently the systems that we've had in place have not been adequate, which is what has contributed to a lot of the issues that we've had over the past few years. The board has approved a couple of months ago a significant investment in a systems modernisation project. That project is going to update firstly our office back-end systems so that we've got the ability to report on all the sorts of different questions that people want to ask. We can actually extract that data. Our present systems are very limited in what they can give us in that regard. We've also got our occurrence management system being developed, which is part of our safety program. And the third component is the modernisation of our website. That work is all kicked off now. The board approved the investment a couple of months ago, and is on track for delivery before the end of this calendar year. So you'll see some big changes happening there, and all changes for the better. One of the significant things that members will see is the ability to conduct all sorts of transactions directly online with immediate payment, immediate response and so forth. So Michael can talk some more about that shortly, but the improvement in our information management is the critical thing from a strategic perspective for the organisation. Other than that, there's probably not much to report. My written report also will go up on the website shortly. It's not there already, is it, Michael? No. It'll be up there shortly, and as with Mick's. And with that, I'll hand back over to Mick.
Did you want to say a few words or leave it to Michael?
I'll just say a few words so people know what's going on. Yeah, good morning. My name's Jim Tatlock. I'm the current treasurer. Now, normally people will be used to me doing a PowerPoint research report. However, we've got a new CEO at the moment who also does PowerPoint presentations and has accounting qualifications, and therefore, rather than death you by PowerPoint, we thought it's more appropriate to do one presentation, and I'll be available to open questions. So I'll hand you across to Michael.
For those, sorry, I'll just jump in first and do a bit of an introduction. For those who aren't or haven't met Michael, this is Michael Linke. He's our new CEO. He's part of that team I mentioned before. I mentioned Kelly specifically. Michael leads the team in our office. He's been on board with us for just under a year, around about 9 or 10 months now. He's the man you can really thank for driving efficiencies in the office. So I'll hand it to Michael to talk about things in the office.
Thank you, Mick. I might stand over here out of the way of this board so I can see it as well. Get this chair out of the way. We've just done a quick presentation. The first 5 or 6 slides are on the finances, and Jim and I are available at the end of this just to answer some financial questions if anybody has specific finance questions. And then I'm going to move into a more generic presentation about life in the office in the last 12 months and some of the plans that Mick and Tony have touched on, and just give you a little bit more meat around those. So if we look, we're just going to take a snapshot of where we are 9 months into the year. At this point in time, we've got $1.8 million, which is about 7.5% ahead of our planned budget. These figures are to the end of March, 31st of March. So they're about a month old now. We've got expenditure budget of about $1.9 million, which is 1.4% over that we suggested that we would spend. But overall, our deficit is 128, which is about $100,000 better than expected. So I remember Jim, I think 12 months ago, in an article in Sport Pilot, was talking $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 deficits for the organisation. They were real, they were factual figures at the time. We needed to really input some structural change into the organisation, and with a lot of this structural change, we've been able to shave an expected $400,000 deficit back to 9 months in the year to a deficit of 128,000, which is a combination of things that's allowed us to achieve that. So we're doing quite well. We're expecting that shouldn't grow too much more before the end of the year. $200,000 would be the outside. I'm expecting not that much, probably $160,000, $170,000 deficit at this point in time. So things have been going well. Memberships continue to tick along. There's no growth in our membership at this point in time. We have had a shedding of members in the last 4 or 5 years. About 6%, I think, of members have lost. Now, that's a whole range of things. Other people choosing not to renew, people dropping off, people going out and doing other things. But there's no exodus of members that some of the rumours are going around that members are leaving in their droves. That's not the case. In fact, in March, one of our last membership months that we reported was the busiest membership month we've had for 12 months. So people are starting to come back. It lightened up again in April a little bit, but we're expecting, again, continued, I suppose, stable figures with that 1%, 2%, 3% variance each month. So there's some pleasing figures there. Good things are aircraft registrations are up since the dramas that we had with our aircraft and the audit issues and the slow processing of aircraft. We're now back up over 3,200 aircraft registered with the organisation when we had dipped under 3,000 a few months ago. So we're starting to see more and more aircraft being registered for the organisation, which is fantastic. So things in that regard are looking up. There's some of our income sources. As you can see, the large volume of our income obviously comes from members and aircraft registration, and there's little bits and pieces of income from a number of other sources there. Our funding from CASA and government hasn't improved. That still sits at about $106,000, $107,000, and that's something that is just not going to change. Significant requests to have gone into CASA to increase our funding. We believe they should be funding the business to about the tune of $1.6 million, and currently we're getting $100,000 of that, so about 5% of what we're suggesting, 7% of what we're suggesting is what CASA's funding us for. We're starting to rethink the model and how we chase funding, and whether it's through the regulator or whether we go directly through the department. And Mick alluded to the fact that we're meeting with Mike Murdoch, the Secretary of the Department of Transport. It'll be one of the items on the agenda that we chat to him about, is an ongoing funding model for the organisation, because we don't believe CASA is the right place to ask for funding. If we look at our where we spend our money, again, staff salaries, as Mick said, that's one of the big expenses. The magazine, printing of the magazine is a big expense, and obviously members' insurance is a big expense. That make up the bulk of our spending, about 75% there. Just go back, Kel. That's it, thanks. About 75% of our spending is on those 3 items. So we're completely restructuring the magazine this year, and we're going to talk a little bit about that at the conclusion of my presentation and during the question and answer forum. We're working with our insurers on a number of insurance matters, and staffing, as Mick said, we've shared a couple of staff. It's about between 2 and 3 full-time equivalent staff that we've reduced the office. We're up over 16 staff. We're operating now at about 13, 13.2, 13.3 staff, with a couple of casuals that come in one day a week here and there to do some catch-up work. So it's we're a fairly lean team now, and I'd like to echo Mick's words. Fantastic team of staff in the office. Kelly's been tremendous support for me when I came into the job 12 months ago, and the rest of the staff in the office, led by a really strong executive leadership team that are very focused on the tasks that they do. We had a couple of questions before the meeting. If we look at the next slide about, well, where does our funding go? Where do we invest? What's the cost of each department? And as you can see there, we've got our 4 departments: our operations, our tech department, our administrative department, and the safety department. Although safety is reflected as a small percentage here, you've got to remember that safety is organisation-wide. It's across the organisation. This is the direct cost of Katie Jenkins, our National Safety Compliance Officer. What we're starting to do with this model now is align and allocate costs directly to the areas of the expenditure and match income with expenditure in the organisation, so we can get a much better picture of where we're spending our money, which will then inform the board to make decisions about membership fees, about aircraft registration fees, about the subscriptions cost for Sport Pilot, how many staff we need, which staff we need in which department, what levels of staff we need in each department. So we're starting to do some serious modelling and cost analysis. The initial modelling has suggested that the operations department runs at a small surplus, so we're able to generate the revenue that we need to deliver the services in that department. The technical department runs at a deficit, significant effort in our technical department, but we're not generating the revenue directly in that department through aircraft registration fees to fund that department. It's not a problem, it's just, that's the fact, that's what happens. And of course, your administration department is a cost. Administration don't generate any revenue. They're the staff, the backbone of the organisation that do all the support services to support the operations and the technical department. So that obviously runs at a loss, and safety currently runs at a cost, which again you would expect. There's no revenue generation in our safety department. That's a necessary cost that the organisation has. So we're really starting to do some serious modelling around this and understand the levers and pulleys within the organisation about where our cost base is, so that we can trim those costs, which is something that I've been doing since I've started. If we move on to our next slide. So looking ahead to 15 and 16, planning ahead, we're expecting revenues of about 2.7 million. We're expecting expenditure of 2.72. As you can see, there's a $30,000 differential there, and we're expecting a surplus. This surplus is dependent on what happens with Sport Pilot and how we roll out Sport Pilot, that being the biggest cost. Our insurance costs are fixed. We've trimmed our staff to the bone. We can't trim staff anymore. The third, I suppose, limb in that massive cost structure of the organisation, across 3/4 of the organisation, will Sport Pilot, and that will determine this. So we'll know in about 6 weeks' time what Sport Pilot is going to look like, what the income levels are, what the cost levels are, as members start to subscribe and we understand the mood of the membership. We've done some surveying and we'll talk a little bit about that shortly. But essentially, that's our financial picture. I think, Kel, that's the last slide, I'm pretty sure. I know. What factors affect us? And we've talked about those: Sport Pilot, reduced staffing, and tighter fiscal control. So focusing on a whole range of things in the office to reduce waste, reduce expenditure, and issues like that. So they're the sort of focus areas that we've invested in finance. I've done a lot of work with Jim. He's come to the office a couple of times. I've been to Melbourne a couple of times. We've had a number of meetings on finances, and it's an area of keen focus. And something that we have introduced is a regular monthly executive meeting where the four of us sit down and we review finances, we review issues in the office. So it's very important that the board, through the executive, are fully informed every 4 to 6 weeks of exactly what's happening, which is what we're doing. And I think that is the last slide. So if anyone's got any questions for Jim or me on the finances, we're happy to take those. If you could raise your hand, we can get the mic to you so our web audience can hear the question as well.
Yeah, we've got one over here.
Maybe.
We'll just hand you the microphone, so...
Just hold on a second.
That's Greg Doyle. I just wanted to ask a question on the income from operations. Where is that coming from?
Our members essentially are our pilots, and that gets assigned to operations because operations are the team that look after our members. That's the membership team. So that's led by Jill Bailey and Janelle, and the two staff in the membership team, Narelle and Jana. So they manage all our members. So we assign the income from members into that team and the costs from members into that team. That's essentially how it's done.
Where the technicals directly in relation to aircraft owners. So, does that answer the question?
Yes, except I think the technical also services the pilots and people who support the organisation generally.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. Each of our areas, be it technical, operations, safety, etc., there is a bit of a blurred line. The simple way to break it down, and it's not 100% accurate, but it's probably the best way to break it down, and I'm not sure you get any value from really diving into the detail, but the majority of money that comes from people subscribing or joining as a member is related to their activities as a pilot, their flying operations. The majority of money that comes from a member who's registering an aircraft is ascribed to the activities associated with the technical aspects of their aircraft. So that's a simple breakdown. And you're right, it's not perfect. As Jim alluded to, there's other costs. There's safety and there's admin. They're the two obvious ones. So some of those funds from member renewals or aircraft registrations has to be allocated accordingly. But that's the broad way that it's done. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Are there any other questions? Yep.
Don Laverick, Michael, the magazine, you're still going to print it and you can buy it. What's happening with the newsagents? Because that always, to me, has been our advertising to the world at large and where any new members are going to come from. Is it still going to be going to make the newsagents?
Thanks. That's an interesting question. We've had that a couple of times about newsagents. What we found when we did our research before we stopped the magazine in the newsagents for a short period of time for a trial, now we're running this trial, we're in about the 6th month of the trial, is we were losing $3,000 a month on supplying the magazine into newsagents. So you extrapolate that for a year, it's a $36,000 loss on the magazine just supplying it into newsagents. We had no evidence that suggested new students or new members were coming through the newsagent cycle, the newsagent system. They were pulping 50% of the magazines in news agencies. The sales in the news agency were $1,200–1,300 a month across the country, and we weren't seeing any bounce from that sale into new membership. What we're thinking and what we're hoping to do is when we print the magazine and we share it with FTFs and aero clubs, and people can share their printed magazine, that the digital magazine might attract a younger audience in that digital space. So the magazine will be shared, we'll share articles through our Facebook page, through our social media page, through our website, and encourage people who get the digital magazine to share that out. So we're hoping that we will attract a different younger audience or a different demographic in that digital space. If that doesn't happen, we're going to review the news agents. We've always got the news agency option open to us now that we've restructured the magazine. But the original decision was a complete cost decision. It was costing $36,000 a year. We needed to save that money. Once we remodel Sport Pilot and once we review it after the first 3 or 4 months, we may well reintroduce it to news agents because the cost benefit to us isn't as damaging as it was 12 months ago. So it's still an option for us. We haven't wiped it altogether. We are continuing to review how and where we deliver Sport Pilot. By all means.
Michael, yes, the insurance cover, we're told it's been increased. The cover has been increased. Could you tell us what the actual numbers are?
Off the top of my head, I think this is published in the latest magazine. Off the top of my head, I think it's gone from 100,000 to 250,000 in terms of third-party personal, and it's gone from 5 million to 10 million in terms of public liability. So they're both significant increases, but verify those numbers in my latest magazine article. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, Dave Caban. Just in relation to the magazine, there was an article that you put in the magazine recently, Michael, saying that it cost $400,000 a year to produce the magazine. In actual fact, with the agreement that we have with the editor and the printing company, it was supposed to be on a reducible basis, and it was not supposed to be anything like that. At current rate, it should be about $275. Does that sound a bit fairer?
$275 sounds very fair to me, a lot fair, but that's not the facts. The facts are, I think, Michael could correct me, it's around about $35,000 to $40,000 per edition. Is that right? That's what we pay today. The contract.
So it's actually gone up.
Where
the actual agreement says that it's supposed to be reducing.
I can't speak to what it has been in the past. I can only speak to what it is today. So it's around about $35,000 to $40,000. This contract predates most of the current board members. And it has been renegotiated. I'm not going to discuss the full terms of that because it's commercial in confidence. That's between RA Oz and the provider of the magazine. But what I will say is that $400,000 give or take. It's not an exact figure, but that is the figure that we pay today. So.
Can I just add that that cost is printing and distribution. The actual editorial production of the magazine is not in that number. The editor takes care of that as part of the arrangement. So editorial is not a cost to RALs at all. That's purely printing and distribution. Postage goes up all the time, so that which drives into distribution cost, and printing has been explored in terms of other options. I know 18 months or so back there was some exploration of offshoring the printing and so forth. That didn't go forward. But yeah, the actual costs are between $35,000 and $40,000 a month.
Yeah, Dave, just the date of that contract, because we know the contracts have been negotiated in the last 12, 18 months. So whatever contract you're looking at certainly isn't in date as far as I'm aware.
And just on that, the contract date was about April, May, I think.
May 2011.
Yeah, so that's quite old. There was a number of new contracts renegotiated, and we're at the end of the contract now, end of April, early May. I'm now in the process of negotiating with the editor of the magazine. We went out to another supplier to see what the costs were, to test that we were getting appropriate market values, and we've made a decision to go with our current editor, Brian Bigg, Stampley I think is the company name, and over the next Stamples, whatever it's called, yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. Sorry Brian if you're watching. And over the next 2 months we're going to renegotiate a brand new contract for 1 July, and that'll be all on current figures, current market prices, and exactly what we want to do with that contract that's fair for Brian, fair for the organisation, and most importantly fair for our members. Don.
Don Ramsey, just a quick question. We've been running in deficits for a couple of years. Can you give us an idea of where our financial reserve net assets sits at the moment, or projected to the end of the year? Thanks.
Just before you start, full financials will be published and made available to all the members on the website.
The 6 monthly reports are on the website, so you're free to look at those. We publish our reports twice a year on the website. 6 monthly are there about the end of January, and they've been there since the end of January. And once we get our audited reports in August, September, they're published on the website as well. But to answer Don's question directly,
Do you know the number?
oh, vaguely, yeah. Yeah, and I've got figures, I can pull up the exact figure, but we've got about 1.2 million in cash reserves, liquid reserves, and we've got about $800,000 in fixed assets. So the organisation has a strong balance sheet of around $2 million in terms of members' equity. So it's still strong. It has eroded about $400,000 to $600,000 in the last 4 to 5 years, but we haven't had to draw down on that. Probably the first couple of months, July, August, September, when I first started, we were still drawing on that, but I think since September we haven't drawn on any of those reserves. We've managed a cash budget from about September, October, with most months being either a small deficit or a small surplus. But the organisation is still financially very strong, very secure. With this type of budget, I'd be happy to run a $100,000 deficit budget this year. We've made the budget to be a slight surplus, and I'll be talking to the board. There's a board meeting tomorrow, and I'll be saying to the board, a small surplus to allow us to do some investments in some marketing and some advertising, maybe an opportunity for the board to consider now that we've arrested the ongoing deficits, and we could sustain a $50,000 to $100,000 deficit for 10 or 15 years without affecting the organisation's future. So I think there's some opportunities there, but I wanted to provide the board and members with comfort that the deficits of the last 3 years have been arrested and we haven't got any more financial concerns or risks that the assets of the organisation are being further eroded. So they're still quite strong.
Can I just add to that as well? Another important consideration I think to make is what is an appropriate level of reserves. At the moment I don't think we're in a very fit state to answer that question. We've got a few risks, legal risks from hangovers of the past that still face us today. I can't talk specifics, we're not allowed to talk specifics. But over the last 12 months, we've had a number of claims made against us that if any one of those actually eventuated, a single claim could sink us. And these are things from events back in 2008, 2009. We sat with a lawyer in our offices about a week or two ago, and if that particular claim did arise, that single claim would sink us today. So we're not in a position at the moment to fully assess what is an appropriate level of reserves. However, that said, it's on the radar for us to consider from a strategic point of view. The other thing is, as Michael said, the current board is probably not averse to investing some of that into growing our association. There's no point in having money in the bank just sitting there offering no return to the members. So we're very aware and very cognizant of the fact that that needs review.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Just on finances at this stage.
One right over there.
Yeah.
Can we just pass the microphone down to the gentleman? Just on the finances.
This was on the magazine. I was just checking, Lawrence Morrow, I was just checking that, have you checked out the flight safety magazine from CASA, how much the utilisation has changed since they went digital and lost their magazine?
And I suppose that's why we're still offering a printed version, because they went completely digital overnight and offered no longer printed version. We're giving members the choice, printed and digital. So, but we're aware of the issues that they faced. If there's no other questions on finances, we might move into the CEO's report, and then we'll wrap the meeting up and go into the question and answer. So, just this is an updated presentation I gave at the annual general meeting. I knew a lot of the people here may not have attended in Lethbridge. Some of you may have, and apologies for that. But just to catch people up, a little bit of background about me and the organisation. So about me, I was born in Sydney, grew up under the flight path in Sydney, hence my interest in aircraft. I've got a degree in taxation. I'm about to finish my master's degree in business administration and marketing this year. I was a public servant for 15 years, and then I've been in the charity and not-for-profit sector for the last 15 years. So a variety of experience that brought me here today. Kel. I look into our possible future. So what we want is to have a very strong organisation, a financially strong organisation with assets available to it to allow us to invest and ultimately return to members. We want the organisation to have strong people, and we want a strong system. And Mick alluded to our systems and our people earlier today, and that's something that we're trying to build. We've got some of the most technically qualified people in the country working for us at the senior level within the organisation, and they're supported by quality staff that just come into work every day, work hard, deal with members every day in an environment that sometimes is hostile, but is generally good, positive, and welcoming for our staff. So they're really starting to enjoy and rise to the challenge, which is fantastic. What we're trying to do is back them up with a solid, positive system. We've got an old system, Pulse, internally, which is very difficult. As you guys members know, to change your address on Pulse, you've got to ring us up or send documents in, and then that's all done manually. So you tell us you live in 4 Smith Street. If your writing's not the best or something gets screwed up on email, your address isn't updated properly. The new system will allow all those errors not to happen because it'll all be digital-based system. Let's move on, Kel. We've got a few runs on the boards since last year, since the new board came in, the new executive came in. Significant change in the organisation. We've introduced our newsletter, we've solved the registration problems. We released a new operations manual in November last year, version 7. We're looking at version 7.1 coming out shortly. To that, we've had some feedback on that. We'll be able to update and edit that. We've rolled out our L1 training, which is now in a review mode, so that the trial of that finished at the end of February. And we're now in review mode, how we're best going to deliver that. And education is something, and training is something that's really bubbled to the surface in the last 6 months for me as a critical need for the organisation. Not only at the maintenance level and the engineering level, but at the human factors level as well. The names, sadly, that Mick read out at the start of the meeting, our information is telling us that these are human factor incidents. They're not maintenance related. They're not engineering related. So we really need to start to consider and focus on human factors. a corporate-wide approach to decision making, to management of data, to management of information, and I think it's one of the first times, and through mixed leadership, that the organisation is pointing in the same direction. The board is talking to the staff are talking to the board. There's that understanding that the board takes responsibility for governance and policy, and the staff take responsibility for the day-to-day operations. So that's very important, and we're starting to see and really get some benefits and get some advantages from that. And we rolled out the modification and repair process a couple of weeks ago. Not a perfect process, not ideal. There's still some questions from that. We're still working through that. We did get misinformation from CASA at the outset. We had to make some changes, but that system and all the information's up on the website now, and Darren is available and ready to talk to people about the MARIT process.
Just explain what that means,
MARIT, it's a modification and repair approval process. So if you have, for instance, say you've got a Gazelle aircraft with an old bolly prop and you can't buy a prop for it, you're allowed to put an alternate prop on it, and Darren can approve that process outside. So it's mainly for older aircraft or aircraft where there currently isn't a modification available for it, a factory modification available for it. We can now approve that process for you. So it's a great step forward for us. Fantastic. It'll help a lot of our legacy aircraft. It doesn't apply to amateur built aircraft or LSA. Okay, so that's the key thing, and that's where there's been some confusion, because amateur built are covered in 9555, the CAO that manages this process, but they're specifically excluded from this modification process. The board's role, the board's focus on policy, strategy, compliance, and managing me. Essentially, that's the role of the board. Historically, we've had boards that have got involved in the operations, the day-to-day of the business. Sometimes they've had to do that because the leadership wasn't working, but now that understanding is quite good. I've got the boundaries that I operate in, and the board has its boundaries that it operates in, and that's really working well in this day and age. My role is to manage and lead the executive leadership team. As I said, I have Darren, I have Jill, we have Katie, and we have Maxine running our administration office. So my 4 leaders manage the organisation for me, and they work with their respective teams. Within the organisation, we've got succession planning in place, so we've got assistant managers and people learning and met with staff. We've done some emails in between, we've massaged and improved the document, and that's been presented a final strategic plan to the board tomorrow at the board meeting, and if that gets signed off, that will be released to members on our website and through our electronic media communications next week. So that's an exciting time for us to have a really solid strategic plan that'll help keep the business focused. From time to time in the business, things pop up and we start working on those things and we forget about things in the past. And something that I'm trying to stop is all these brand new ideas where we just move on quickly from one thing to the other, and you never complete anything. You've got 15 projects on the go, and you don't feel you're achieving anything. What we're trying to do with the strategic plan is say, well, this is our business, this is what we're doing, these are the projects that we're working on, and we'll start to deliver those projects. So that's an important process for us. The modernisation project, we've spoken a little bit about that. Improving the internal office processes, improving and redeveloping our website, and building an occurrence management system. What we're really trying to encourage is voluntary reporting of incidents and issues and accidents and hazards. Mark Skidmore, we met with Mark Skidmore, as Mick said last week, and CASA aren't interested in hitting people over the head with a stick if something goes wrong. Neither are we. If you do something wrong in your aircraft, tell us about it, because then if something happens here in Cessnock and something happens at Archerfield and something happens in Parafield and something happens in Hobart, our safety manager can then see, hang on a sec, we've got 4 incidents happening, similar aircraft, similar training, similar issue. What can we do to communicate to all our members to improve that? It's like an AN, an advisory notice. Hang on a sec, we've noticed this trend. Let's get this notice out to our members. So it's not about policing members. It's not about disciplining members. It's not about compliance with members. It's about communication with members. And it's only when you guys tell us that you've got a problem or you've had an issue with your aircraft that we can start to manage that system. So we're going to build a system that's going to allow you to report directly into that system. It'll be iPad-based, iPhone-based, Android-based, however you want to report, you'll be able to report. So you can report from your aircraft if you have an issue. So if your engine doesn't have, or if you have a rough landing, you feel you need to report that, you can report that whilst you're still in your aircraft. Very important tool. We'll then use that at a statistical level, not at an individual level, at a statistical level, to help educate, train, guide members to make improvements across the organisation. It's only when members are voluntarily reporting that we can truly improve safety and improve outcomes for all our members. So I implore our members to report and use that system. Interestingly, since the Jabiru instrument was introduced in December, we've had about an 80% reduction in members reporting incidents for fear of something happening. Now, I don't understand that. I think if you report, you're better off knowing, and we're better off knowing. So let's try and improve that compliance culture. And we're adopting a no-blame culture, okay? So a just culture is the ICAO standard, that the language we're using. We're calling it a no-blame culture. We're not going to blame you, but you might need some training, you might need some advice, but more importantly, we can tell other people, de-identified, that we've had these incidents and this is what the organisation is doing about them. That's the occurrence management system. The website, as I'm sure people here know who use our website, it's cumbersome, it's difficult, it's looking a bit old and a bit tired, so we're going to revamp that. We've finished a lot of the design work on that, the initial design work. It's going to be a much brighter, much easier to use facility. It's going to be a library system with tagging in it, so you're much easier to find forms, much easier to log in and get information, much easier to access digital and electronic information, and find stuff relevant to you. So it's going to be a really cool tool. And then internally for our staff is the Pulse system. So you'll have your own members portal. You'll be able to log on, put your hours in, change your address, pay for your registration, pay for your membership, 1 year, 2 year membership, subscribe to the magazine, do all those things online, and manage your own information, which is going to reduce our paper use by about 60, 70, 75% within the office. So that's going to be a really positive tool for us. And then we're going to have a modern internal system for our staff to use. So the staff are going to increase their efficiency as well in using this system. So that's essentially the project. As Tony said, the board approved that in March. It's a significant investment, about $275,000 investment in this asset that will remain with the organisation, and it's a significant investment, and we're hoping to roll it out. We're not hoping, the plan is that it'll be rolled out October, November this year. So I'm going to New York in November, so it's got to be rolled out by then. Fingers crossed. Other hot topics. Members, digitisation of Sport Pilot is a hot topic, and we'll talk about that in the forum. Additional endorsements for members. We're looking at an ultralight pilot certificate for our regional and remote members. We're looking at a rural operations endorsement. We're looking at a weight increase, and we're looking at controlled airspace endorsements. Controlled airspace is probably the priority at this stage. That's the we're seeing some competition from the RPL, and we believe if we get some access to controlled airspace, it will be a definitive competitor to RPL and allow members to stay with us and continue to enjoy flying within controlled airspace as well. Organisational hot topics. We've commenced consultation on a new constitution. Mick might like to wave it around. I think we have a real constitution there. Completely redrafted, rewritten constitution. We've invited members in March Sport Pilot to give us some feedback and give us an update on that. We've worked with our lawyers, the executive, Mick and I have worked on a draft, and we've got a draft constitution. We'll probably get that out to the broader membership in the next 2 to 4 weeks. We just need to do some fine tuning, make some decisions about the legal structure of the organisation, and then we go further out to members for some additional consultation. So that's an exciting time for us. Structural changes within the organisation to protect us against deficits, and we've talked about a little bit about that with the reduced staffing, and we're targeting the next generation of pilots and members through social media campaign. In December, we had 100 followers on Facebook. Today, I think we're at 6,000 followers. So in 6 months, in 5 months, we've completely smashed our social media audience, and we're looking at a target of 10,000 followers on Facebook by Christmas. So we're really starting to embrace technology and tap into young flyers. We had the most number of members apply for gift scholarships this year. Historically, we've had 30 applications. We had 64 this year. We handed out $50,000 in scholarships a couple of weeks ago, and it's a fantastic outcome to see the next generation of flyers coming through. And we've had significant media. Some of you might have seen Holly Adams, one of our young flyers from Narromine, got significant media and press coverage. We've tapped into that, and we've tapped into other members and starting to get some further promotion. We did some work at Jindabyne recently, made the front page of the paper down in Jindabyne with a couple of our members that won scholarships as well. So really starting to promote and manage that. What else have we got there, Kel? Sport Pilot, as we know, Sport Pilot's going digital. We've spoken about that. we'll talk more about that in the forum when the meeting's concluded. But yes, there'll be 2 versions of Sport Pilot. One's free and one you'll pay for. So, next one. Financial landscape. We've spoken about that. The cost base. We talked a little bit about the cost base. So I had those charts up before. So we've covered that in the finance report. We've created a shared vision for the organisation: safe, accessible, fun and enjoyable aviation. If you notice, the first 4 letters of the first 4 words also make the word safe, if they're around the right way. Who edited this, Kelly? Don't say me. It was me, wasn't it? Yeah, no, it was me. It was me. So yes, it is safe when we get that in the right order, and that's how we start to make decisions within the organisation. So that's an exciting thing for us, and it just encapsulates the organisation for us in 5 short words, which is fantastic. How can RALs support members is the key thing, and we'll talk about that in the forum. So that's pretty much it from me. Unless there's any specific questions on that report, we might close the meeting and move into the forum in the next couple of minutes, but I'll hand back to Mick.
Okay, does anyone have any questions on the Secretary, CEO or President's report? If not, we might move a motion to accept those. So any questions? Okay. Yep. Hang on, we'll just get the microphone over to you.
What's the story with Nat Fly, and has there been any late trying to find out why it's been declining, or late information?
Do you want to handle it?
We made a conscious decision. There was a little bit of turmoil around the time that the last NAFLI was run, and we made a conscious decision this time that we're not going to do a half-baked job, essentially. What we've experimented with this year is attending a number of different fly-ins around the country. We're not convinced that RAL should be in the business of competing with other local airfields and aero clubs and organisations that run air shows very, very well. This year, the biggest we've attended is Avalon. It's not really a competitor to NatFly, but we had about 3,000 to 4,000 people through our tent at Avalon. On top of that, we've done Loxton, we've done Clifton, we've done Barossa, we've done a number of others. With those efforts, Michael and I did a rough back-of-the-envelope calculation the other day. We've spent around about $4,000 over 6 months getting various staff members to those fly-ins. Michael and I have personally attended a few. Tony's been to Clifton. Some of the staff have gone to others. We don't all attend everything. It's just not a productive use of funds. But what it does mean is that with that $4,000 that we've spent over the last 6 months, we've come into contact with thousands of members, thousands of potential members, and certainly well over 1,000 actual members who are a part of the organisation today. This compares with NatFly. I think in our last couple of NatFlyers, we got around about 100 aircraft or so. Let's assume that they each carry 2 people. There's 200 members and another 100 drive in. That's only about 300, and that costs us in the order of about $30,000 to run. So what we're trying to do is make ourselves more acceptable to more members right across the country. Like I say, we've been everywhere. We'll be in, Old Station in a couple of weeks. Queensland, we've been down to Victoria, we've been to a couple. Michael and I personally flew to Narromine in my aircraft a couple of weeks ago and down to Jindabyne. We've been to South Australia. We're trying to get around to where our members are, rather than having one event where a couple of % of our members can get to. It's not to say we'll never hold NatFly again. It's just it's in the experimental stage at this point. And that said, all the members that we've managed to get to have been very welcoming and very appreciative of the fact that we've done that. So we're up here today talking to you guys. This is what we're about. As Michael said, we're putting the members central to everything we do. So, we've got one right at the back.
Lawrence Morrigan. Jaraboo are most of the engines which are on a lot of our aircraft. What's the status of that now?
Can we hold that over to the question and answer session? We'll just keep answering the things that we've spoken about up here. Dave?
Yeah, you made the statement that the last gnatfly cost $30,000. In the past, gnatfly has had sponsorship, and we sold trade sites, and usually ran at a profit rather than a loss. If aircraft didn't turn up, why would we end up incurring such a massive loss? Or was that the outlay without the income? Are we only talking one side of the equation here, or is that a total loss?
No, look, Dave, you're right in the sense that that's the outlay to run it. We haven't run at a loss to that extent. However, what we found with the last gnatfly is we had trouble getting sponsors, and it's progressively been getting worse. And with the last one that we ran, most of the sponsors indicated they wouldn't re-sign. The township had basically, the council loved it and the shopkeepers hated it because it was right across the Easter weekend. And they said, we end up paying our staff members to work across Easter. We can never go away and you don't bring people into the shops. The first year we did when we ran it, and the second year and third year it died off. So you're correct, we didn't lose expanses of money, but we were going to if we ran it again, or we were comfortable we were going to run at a loss if we continued it on.
So what needs to happen is the tender process needs to be reintroduced and see who wants to do it and why and where.
If we choose to run it, yes.
So the other thing about gnatfly is that attendance had been declining over a number of years. Last gnatfly, I think there was a total of 140 aircraft, and nearly half of those were GA aircraft. So 70 or 80 aircraft of ours out of a total of 3,200 aircraft on our register. You know, that's about 3% of our members were supporting that event. More aircraft than that turned up to Clifton. It was starting to look like not an effective use of our effort and our members' funds as well.
Just to go back to your cost question, there's also a whole bunch of hidden costs that have never been accounted for in the past. We generally have 2 or 3 staff members working almost full time in the months leading up to gnatfly. That's never been accounted for. So absolutely, but if you can divert that to a more productive use of their time and their funds, and like I say, we've cut back a number of staff this year. Yeah. So yeah, the object here is that we will. Yep. We'll just take a broader strategic look at what we're doing. We're also taking part. We're taking a small active role in Ozfly this year, so we'll be back at Narromine in September or October. September. So we will be there, and that's part of our broader efforts to get around the country. So it's not like we're walking away from these events, we're just exploring a different way to offer better value.
Also, in the post-mortem for last year's gnatfly, we did do a lot of research surveys. Why would people not there? You know, what were the factors that made them decide to be there or to not be there, and so forth. So we did do quite a bit of research. I don't have the results off the top of my head because it was quite some time ago we did that, but that kind of suggested to us that there might be more effective and productive ways to, reach out and service our members as well.
All right, we had one more question down the front here, and then we'll have a look at that.
Ken Thornton, hello. I have 2 questions, but I think the second one I'll do for general speech. First one is, what is happening to maintenance people for insurance? It's been worked on for years, I've tried.
I will. We'll talk about insurance at a broader level during the forum when we close the meeting. Okay. Other questions?
We might. We'll take the last question just down here at the front, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yes, BFRs. With the present situation with Jabberoos, we have to get, if we take a passenger, they've got to sign a form. What about if it's an instructor? Do they have to sign the form, or do we have to sign it for them, or what's the situation?
Yeah, once again, we'll cover that in the Q&A session. We'll just focus on the general business, but no doubt there's going to be a lot of questions on Jabberoo, so we will come back to that, okay? So we'll wrap that up there. Do we Can we get someone to move acceptance of those reports? So that'll include the President, Secretary, Treasurer and CEO report. We've got Dave Kimban to move and Ron West to second. All those in favour? Okay, that's carried. The next item is business arising from reports. There is no business. I think we've covered off on that. So we'll close the general meeting at that point. So what are we? At 11 o'clock, pretty much bang on the hour. Thank you for attending. For those who are watching remotely, thank you for watching. We'll now take a short recess, about 3 to 5 minutes. So we'll come back, make it an easy number. We'll come back at 11:05. So if anyone wants to get up, stretch their legs, go to the toilet, grab a drink, we'll reconvene and we'll have a question, and we'll start with the 2 Jabiru questions that have been posed. And the forum will be live as well. Okay. So we'll see everyone back here at 11:05.